A very quick sound check before we move any further in this first lesson, just to ensure that you can all hear me loud and clear. So please type in yes into the chat box just to confirm that we have no sound or visual issues. You'll find the chat box in the lower right hand corner of your screens. Okay, so welcome everybody to our first lesson in this Diploma in Lightroom course. My name is William Eames. I am your course educator. I am the head of the photography department here in Shaw Academy. I teach the photography course, the advanced photography course, and indeed this Lightroom course here as well. And I'll be taking you throughout your journey in learning everything about how to master Lightroom and how to master your workflow and editing within Lightroom. We have a little bit of housekeeping just to get through before we kick off into the lesson. First of all, the aforementioned chat box. If you haven't found it just yet, you will find it in the lower right hand corner of your screen. You can chat with Morpheus, our intelligent educational AI. So if you have any questions at all throughout this lesson, you can simply type in and Morpheus will be able to help you out. We also have live support here as well to help you out if you're having any technical issues or anything like that at all. But you can also chat with your friends and chat with your peers as well using the chat with peers option. So if you'd rather be having a discussion about Lightroom, or if there's something that you don't understand that maybe one of your peers understands as well, you can have a chat with them too. And please remember to rate the responses as well with Morpheus so we can improve the answers, the responses that you are getting to. If you could also help to us to improve the lessons as well, at the end of the lesson you will be asked to rate the lesson overall, and this is very important feedback for myself as an educator to help improve the quality of these lessons too. So you'll be prompted at the end of the lesson, and I really appreciate your honest feedback there. So you are on module number 1 of your diploma, your professional diploma in photography. Lightroom is not a huge program, so we can cover it in 4 weeks. But if you decide that you want to move on to more advanced modules and learn more about your photography, you will be moving on to an advanced photography course. And at the end of it, you can obtain an EQF Level 5 professional diploma in photography. I'll have a lot more information about this as we continue on through the lessons. But for now, let's just concentrate on our education around Lightroom. If you ever miss any lessons, it's very easy to catch up. Simply log into your student login area on shawacademy.com and you'll be able to watch the most recent lesson and indeed go through any other lessons that you may have missed throughout the course. Lessons are generally uploaded as soon as the lesson has finished, but at the very latest it'll be 24 hours after the live lesson is shown. So let's have a look at what we're going to be covering over these next 4 weeks, or indeed these next 8 lessons. So we're going to kick things off by having a look at getting organized, getting started within Lightroom, starting at the beginning, importing our photographs into Lightroom and organizing them into folders. And this is what Lightroom really is about. It's not just about the editing side of things, which is the most fun part really, but it is also about creating a workflow for ourselves as photographers. So that's what we're going to have a look at in this lesson. Then we'll get into the editing side of things in the next lesson. We'll have a look at the develop module and start making some adjustments to our photographs. We'll take that a step further in week 2, where we'll look at precision enhancements and color and black and white, and we'll move on into powerful lens corrections, correcting things like sharpness and noise in our photographs. Then we'll have a look at batch editing. So if we work on hundreds and hundreds of photographs at the same time, we can do a huge amount within Lightroom to speed up our workflow. So for example, if you're a wedding photographer or an event photographer, after a day's shoot you're going to come out with perhaps over 1,000 photographs. You need to work very, very quickly on them. That's what we'll have a look at within lesson 6. Then in lesson 7 we'll get creative within Lightroom. We'll have a look at how we can have an output for our photographs, look at how to create a photo book. This is a great thing to create for yourselves, for your family, and indeed for clients as well. And we'll talk about HDR photography and panoramic photography in the final lesson. So what are we going to have a look at in this very first lesson? Well, we're going to kick things off by talking about what version of Lightroom I'll be using within this course. Okay, so there's a couple of different versions out there. You might be wondering, what version do I use in this course? What is the version that I have? Is that going to be good enough for the course? We'll speak about that now in just a moment. We'll have an overview of Lightroom. We'll have a look at how to import our photographs into Lightroom. We'll talk about the library, so we'll have a look at how to begin to organize our photographs in Lightroom, and how we can make folders, and how we can fix links as well if we break links too. Lightroom is a very intuitive program, and while organization might not be the most fun part of photography, Lightroom actually makes it very, very simple and very straightforward to do. And realistically, you know, when you're organizing your shots, you only have to ever do it once. When you create a system for yourself, you just follow that system and it'll get easier every single time. And then we'll have a summary, we'll do a bit of course interaction with an FAQ at the end of the lesson as well. So firstly, what version of Lightroom should you use, or what version of Lightroom am I using? Well, there's two main versions of Lightroom available at the moment. The first off is what's known as a Lightroom CC. Lightroom CC. And this is essentially a cloud-based version of Lightroom. It's very much a streamlined version of Lightroom. It's like an app. Okay, it's very much like a straightforward app. There's a lot less options available in it than the full version of Lightroom, which we'll speak about in just a moment. But it's great for phones and tablets and for editing on the go. And your photographs are stored on Adobe Cloud. So if you haven't downloaded Lightroom yet and you're planning to download it, I have to say, I don't recommend that you download Lightroom CC. The version that we'll be using in this course is Lightroom Classic. Lightroom Classic, which is the desktop version. This is what Lightroom CC looks like. So it's a very straightforward application. It has a lot of options that you will find in the full version of Lightroom. The most important options that you'll find in the full version of Lightroom. But if you really want to get the most out of your photography, out of your workflow, and out of your editing, I recommend that you go for a Lightroom Classic, which was formerly Lightroom CC, just to add more confusion to the whole thing. So Lightroom Classic was formerly Lightroom CC. This is the desktop version. This is the full version that I recommend for this course. You can download a trial from adobe.com. Has far more options. It's much faster as well. You can have storage from multiple sources, so you can have storage from your external hard drives, from your computer, and from cloud-based services like Dropbox as well. It's a far more versatile version of Lightroom. And really, you know, if you're planning on ever getting to a stage where you're working professionally, it is strongly recommended that you go for this version instead. If you happen to be using an older standalone version of Lightroom, so for example Lightroom 5, Lightroom 6, these are going to be perfect for the course as well. They may not have every single option that I talk about throughout this course, but the vast majority of what we cover in these lessons will be applicable to whatever version of Lightroom that you do happen to be using. Now, if you have any other questions about that at all, if you're not sure about the one that you should be using, please email me at support.lightroom@shawacademy.com and I'll be able to expand upon this a little bit more for you. But for now, let's get into Lightroom Classic and let's start organizing our photographs. Okay, so let's start digging around Lightroom. We'll have a quick overview first of all and see exactly what it is that we are dealing with here. Now, if you're using a version older than Lightroom 5, there might be some things a little bit later on in the course, some of the tools that you may not have, but there's always workarounds in terms of the things that I'll show you, and you know, I'll always mention as well, you know, if it's not available in an older version and so on. But let's have a look at first of all what we're dealing with. And essentially what Lightroom is broken down into is we have modules, and each module then has a slightly different interface. So for example, when you open up Lightroom for the very first time, we're going to be having a look at the library module, and that's what we're going to be exploring now in this lesson. But we've got 4 panels essentially. So we've got a panel over here on the left hand side, we have our main panel here in the middle, and we also have our panels on the right hand side. And we've got a final panel here at the bottom, which is called our film strip, and we'll see all of our photographs appear at the bottom here when we import them into Lightroom. Then we have our different modules. We can click each of these. We've got our development module. This is where we'll edit our photographs. There's a map, there's a book module, which we're going to have a look at, a bit later on throughout the course. Okay, so each of these, we will explore in due time. Okay, so for the moment, we're going to stick with the library module. Now, generally everything that we need to be able to do through Lightroom is always on the screen for us. Okay, so there's a lot going on here in all these little icons and these little buttons and so on that we can press, but we'll always find them back here at the top as well. So you have your file, your edit, your library. It's called Lightroom there if you're using a Mac too. That's your edit menu. We've got photo and so on. And all of these options we will be exploring throughout the course as well. Okay, so just to give you an idea of where things are located. Now, the first thing I want to talk about though before we import any photographs into Lightroom is the catalog. So if we have a look here over on the left hand side, we have this option here called the catalog, and I'm just going to click that down. Each time you click each of these panels down, they'll expand out. These little triangles will allow you to keep everything nice and neat and organized, and that's one thing that we want, and as photographers, is to keep everything nice and neat. But the idea of the catalog is that when we import photographs into Lightroom, we're not importing them to be stored within Lightroom. Lightroom doesn't store our photographs. Our photographs are still stored on our computers. Lightroom is an interface that's used to interact with our photographs, to edit our photographs, to organize our photographs, and everything that we'll have a look at, throughout the course. Okay, but it does this by using the catalog. So the catalog essentially works as a middleman or woman through our photographs. Okay, so in other words, when we import images into Lightroom, what's actually being imported is information. So the information is a preview of the photograph, metadata, and lots of other information about the shot. But the preview is essentially what we are working on within Lightroom. And when we've made all of our changes to our photograph, we hit the export option, and this will save our photographs. Then it'll essentially save our photographs as a copy, or if you wanted to overwrite your original file, you can do that as well. But for that reason, the catalog is actually an incredibly safe way to work on our photographs. I always get asked what's the main difference between Photoshop and Lightroom, and that is actually the biggest difference. The catalog is a very, very safe way, a completely non-destructive way of working on our photographs as photographers. So I do want to make you aware of it. Now, you do not need to create a new catalog every time you import photographs. I'll stress that now. One catalog will hold information for up to about 150,000 pictures. Okay, so I strongly recommend that you only work with one catalog for the moment. As you become much more proficient in Lightroom, you might decide to create new catalogs for yourselves, but I really recommend that you stick with just one for the moment. If you want to locate your catalog, if you go to the Edit or the Lightroom option, you simply select Catalog Settings, and it comes up with an option here then, and it'll show you where it is. You can see the location here, and you can simply click that, and it comes up and it'll show you there exactly where it is located on your computer. If you delete this, you will unfortunately lose the information, the edits you've made to your photographs. You won't lose your photographs. You can't delete your photographs by deleting a catalog, but you lose any changes that you've made. So for that reason, I do recommend you also back up your catalogs at least once a week. So you can choose when you want to back them up. It'll prompt you when you close Lightroom if you want to back